Before beginning this very special episode of Print from the Past, I want to send a sincere salute of gratitude to Benny. Benny, I know, is watching this episode. He sold me the copy of this magazine that I'm going to be opening in this episode. I didn't even know who this was when I purchased it on eBay. The seller, Benny, made a great offer, and I accepted. I jumped on it as soon as I saw it. It was less than market value. And as it turns out, Benny's actually local to me. I had no idea that Benny lived in this part of the state or even who he was. We were friends on Facebook, and I had no idea that he watched the show, which he does. And he set me up with this magazine and a couple of others, which I'll show toward the end. Benny's awesome, and without him, I wouldn't be doing this episode today. So, Benny, many thanks, and I hope that you enjoy this episode. This one's for you. Let's go back to 1995. In 1995, I was 22, about to turn 23. I was working as an office assistant at a fastener company after being unemployed for almost a year. I was let go from AT&T as a long-distance operator in 1993, and through 1994, most of 1994, I was unemployed. So, getting the opportunity to get a new job and to get some more money underneath me was tremendous. I was able to start buying video games again, going to the arcade a little bit more, and taking part in my favorite thing to do every month at that time, which was buying video game magazines. For whatever reason, I didn't subscribe to any. I always bought magazines from the newsstand. I reasoned with the last episode that I did on Game Players magazine that one of the reasons I like to buy from the newsstand is sometimes they would come with cool stuff, like posters or inserts or cards or stickers, things like that. So I always found it more interesting and a little bit better proposition to go to the bookstore like Walden Books or Barnes & Noble to buy these than it was to subscribe and get them automatically in the mail. So I would be picking up all of the usual suspects, Electronic Gaming Monthly and Game Pro and Game Fan and Video Games and Computer Entertainment and Game Players, of course. But in 1995, there was a magazine that hit the newsstand that when I saw it, I knew that I was interested because its approach was so much different from anything else that I had read. It came off as a serious magazine for the more dedicated gaming fan. Maybe not like highbrow, but definitely more mature. And I really appreciated that being a young adult at the time. I was looking for something that was more business-oriented, more to the point, a little less on the humor side and more on the this is really what's happening side of the equation. And that magazine is what we're going to be opening today, the very first issue that hit newsstands in January of 1995. I cannot believe I am holding this copy because I have been after it for so long, and it is actually here, and I'm opening it in this episode. It is Next Generation Magazine, issue number 1, the premiere issue, and you can see the collector's seal, the collector's issue seal right there. Again, I am in a mirrored view, so I'm seeing everything backwards when I'm looking at the camera, but this is it. It is sealed, and it is mine, and I'm going to open it in this episode of Print from the Past. So stick with me as we take a look, and we open this up, and we take a look at the very first issue of Next Generation Magazine from, wow, really? 25 years ago. Next Generation Magazine has been a favorite of mine ever since I saw it. I loved the approach that the magazine took. Again, it was a bit more serious. While I certainly appreciate the humor and maybe the more universal approach to video game coverage, video game industry coverage, this just came off as a little more adult, a little more mature, and something that was right up my alley. As someone who had been interested in gaming for a long time and who felt himself growing up, I thought that this was a great match for me. And as you can see, just based on the cover, it looks serious. There's images from, it looks like Virtua Fighter here, I'm pretty sure that's what it is. There's not a lot going on, but it is very much to the point. And of course, it's getting us ready for the looming video game wars of 1995, which of course would pit the Sega Saturn versus the Sony PlayStation, whereas they're also dealing with the remnants of the 16-bit wars from the Genesis and the Super Nintendo. So there's a lot going on at this time in 1995, and I was all over this. So, without further ado, I cannot believe I'm doing this, and collectors would probably think I'm nuts. But I want to read it, and I'm going to open it. So let us open it together. I'm just going to tear that open. I'm going to tear off the top. You have no idea, like, my heart is racing because I'm so excited to be opening this. I just got this today, and I just did an episode of the show, like, last night, and I'm doing another one because this was not going to wait. So here is the magazine, and the cover actually extends to the back. And notice how there's no advertising on the back. It is just the image stretched. And again, you can take a look at the collector's issue medal or sticker. That is just so cool to look at. So let's take a look and see what's on the inside. And oh, that's awesome. So that this folds out so you can see more of the characters, and it tells you a little bit more about the consoles that we're looking at. We have the Sega Saturn, the Sony PlayStation, and the 3DO, which, oh, by the way, deserves to be in that conversation. I've talked about the 3DO a few times, and how I think that the 3DO is really the trendsetter, despite the fact that it was a more expensive console, and really opened the door for the Saturn and the PlayStation to succeed and thrive. So the golden age of 16-bit is over, says the fold-out. There's 9 new cutting-edge systems prepare for war. Next generation reports from the field, talking about the PlayStation, calling it the PS-X, which I used to call it for a long time. As PSX launches in Japan, Sony's plan for video game nominations revealed, talking about the 3DO. It's here, it's now, and 3DO finally has some killer games, but is it enough? Spoiler alert, it was not. And the Sega Saturn, based on arcade hardware, Sega's 32-bit system talks big, but can it deliver? This is your essential guide to these and 6 other next-generation systems, and it starts on page 36. And we have an opening here that kind of sets the stage for what would be a pretty long run for this particular magazine. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but that's awesome. And this folds out, by the way. We get, looks like an ad for a PC-ROM game, the PC CD-ROM game. Man, this is awesome. All right, so let's just get to it, shall we? The paper stock is it's amazing. The paper is nice and thick. It's great quality. See who I recognize here. Douglas Perry is the production editor. Editorial contributors: Jeff Lundgren, Chris Slate, Mike Salmon. Edge Magazine is credited here as a contributor. Marcus Webb, Mark Ramshaw. So definitely some familiar names here on the bylines, which is just it's really cool. So I'll open this up so you can take a look and see. And again, it had that next generation feel to it. The layout just looked cool. It looked cutting edge, at least it did to me, with the images, but not too big, not too small, not overly colorful, except for the sections and divisions over here. But this just, to me, looked fantastic. You can see Trip Hawkins next to his beloved 3DO system there. Again, I will go to my grave and talk about how the 3DO was just, it wound up being unsuccessful, not because it wasn't a great system, but because of its price tag. Also has some information here on, it looks like Virtua Racing, 32X success at the cost of Saturn, Nintendo's VR32, so we're talking about the Virtual Boy and more. So yeah, let's go ahead and dig in. Have an ad here for the 32X. Oh boy, 1990s attitude. Mommy, what are those 2 Sega machines doing? Oh boy. Attitude, and definitely a lot of it in the mid-1990s, and we're seeing the 32X, of course, plugging into the top of the Sega Genesis 2 console. I did have a 32X. I've talked about the 32X before, about the troubles that I had with it. I think it was doomed from the start, but of course we wanted it because it was a 32-bit add-on. And unfortunately, the only 2 games I had, which were Virtua Racing and Star Wars Arcade, just weren't enough to really keep my interest in the add-on. So I kind of blew $100 and some odd. And right away, we start with an interview with Trip Hawkins here. Now or never for 3DO. And I love these pictures. great shots of him with the 3DO, with games, and definitely believing in the console. Again, this is January of 1995, probably going back to the late 1994, when the 3DO was still very much a player in the business, despite the fact that sales were low. 3DO is just I owned one, although I didn't get it until like late winter, early spring of 95. But once I had it, I was really impressed with it. Of course, I had to have Road Rash, I had Need for Speed, I had Shockwave, John Madden Football, Wing Commander. I had the games that I really wanted to play. Twisted, which is a great game show, and more. We've seen reviews of the 3DO before about the Daisy Chan controllers and how the controllers weren't necessarily all that great. But I really did enjoy my time with the 3DO, and I wish it had a better outcome, much like I think that the TurboGrafx 16 should have. Talking a little bit about M2, we've talked about M2 on this show before because M2 has been mentioned quite a few times. M2, the console of sorts that never wound up being a thing from Matsushita. The Power PC chip, the heart and soul of 3DO's M2 accelerator, due late 1995. Of course, that just never wound up being a thing. So why 3DO? No real reason, but it does sit well with audio and video. That's interesting stuff. It's a great interview. I'm not going to read all of it. I'm not going to read it actually at all because this video is already going to run long. But it is a fascinating interview, and I've always found Trip Hawkins to be a fascinating individual in the business. So I'll be looking forward to reading this at length a little bit later on. And again, this was not just a console-specific magazine. There was PC coverage here as well. So we did get some ads for PC gaming along the way. 32X takes Genesis one step forward. So here in early 95, we are giving the 32X the benefit of the doubt, even though things didn't work out for the add-on. If I'm being completely honest and completely fair and trying to be objective, and I really do accentuate the term trying, the 32X probably gets a little too much guff. I think there were some really good games for it. I think there were some good games for it. The issues with it really being the lack of software. There just wasn't enough to support the add-on. And I do think that it really wasn't enough of a boost, I think, to really warrant being released. I think the games that there were for it, some of them were really good. I just don't think there was enough, and I don't think that there was enough to justify the add-on as kind of like a bridge between the Genesis and the Saturn. Nevertheless, though, Next Generation giving it its due by writing about it and showing some screenshots as well. Seeing screenshots from, it looks like Virtua Racing here, Star Wars Arcade, and more. There's a golf game here too. U.S. launch for the Neo Geo CD. I've never owned a Neo Geo. I've never owned a Neo Geo CD. I've never owned a Neo Geo Pocket Color. Neo Geo and I don't have an excuse, and I don't have a reason. It's certainly not any hate. I think it's just that the games that there have been for the Neo Geo really haven't been up my alley. I think the one that really resonates with me is Neo Turf Masters, which we can't even call it that anymore. But that was the one game, and I wound up playing that like in the late 90s at a 5 and dime arcade. That was far too late for me to be interested in a Neo Geo at all. But here's some information on the Neo Geo CD. Coin-Op's staying on the cutting edge, and of course you know that arcades are near and dear to my heart, so we have some arcade coverage here. Virtua Cop is covered. We have Virtua Fighter covered as well, and there's a Namco 4-player Ace Driver, it looks like, which is an F1 sim. Those are just some of the games that are covered here as they talk about arcade coverage. Always been a fan of arcades, and even through the 1990s and even into the early 2000s, if I'm being honest, I was an arcade guy. If there was an arcade around, I was finding my way in there to spend time and tokens, and I never regretted a minute of it. I have spent most of my life in arcades, a lot of the 1980s, much of the 1990s, and about half of the 2000s, just in arcades whenever I possibly could. They're my fortress of solitude. They're my place to get away from it all, to put pause on life, and to just play. And I've always enjoyed them. I miss them, especially now in our COVID era, and I'm hoping to get back into them once things resolve. My fingers are crossed. More information about arcades here. It looks like there is a Darius Gaiden is listed here. Golden Axe: The Duel, Samurai Spirits, Title Fight 2. And from Bally Midway, we have Cruisin' USA. Williams, Bally Midway. What a matchup. I could go on and on and on about Midway and Williams and Bally Senti and how they were such big players in the arcade era. Of course, in the 1990s, Midway was really making a name for itself with NBA Jam and eventually with NFL Blitz. I love Midway. I miss them every day since they've been gone. By the way, make sure you check out Insert Coin, which is a great documentary about Midway. If you haven't seen it yet, I believe that it's available for streaming and for rental. Check it out. I know the gentleman who put it together. Josh, if you were watching, you are an amazing individual, and thanks for all the hard work that you've put in. Saturn's launch date is set. Of course, we all know what happened with the Saturn, at least here in the US, where it was a surprise launch just during E3, which caught even retailers off guard. But here's a look at the Saturn in its earlier stages. So the launch date is set, it says here. In a move designed to gazump Sony. Gazump, I love that word. To gazump Sony, which shifted the PlayStation launch forward to November 30th to maximize its sales, Sega announced its plans to launch the Saturn on November 22nd. I believe that was in Japan, so I think that was 94 that they're talking about, so it's not the US launch here. That's what I'm most familiar with, of course. We have an ad for Star Trek The Next Generation of Final Unity for IBM CD-ROM. Always been interested in the Star Trek games. My favorite is Star Trek Strategic Operations Simulator for arcade, and it was also available for the Atari 2600, the ColecoVision, and other consoles. But this is pretty cool. And I've talked about multimedia before. I talked about it a lot in the last episode, and I'll repeat it here. There was very much a buzzword for this particular time period. Multimedia, of course, being video and quality audio and video game animations and combining it into one experience. And that's a lot of what these games were. The UK chip delivering 3D power. The Glint chip packing 304 pins spaced at intervals of 0.5 millimeters. Unfortunately, with PC gaming, it is not my area of expertise. I've been a console player since the very beginning. And while I do have a Mac now, which makes video games on computer a little bit more difficult, I've just never been the biggest PC guy. So reading about this and learning about this, or about PC gaming in general, through channels like Lazy Game Reviews, for example, Clint, you're awesome. That's how I've learned, is really by osmosis and through YouTube rather than through personal experience. But they have some information here about the Glint 300SX graphics processor. And I love just looking at these photos and these diagrams. Always fascinated me. So Movers and Shakers, a monthly look at the business news that affects the gaming world, from Selby Bateman. Let's see. Sega Atari, tell the lawyers to kiss and make up. Relations between Atari and Sega are much improved now that Atari has dropped this patent infringement lawsuit against Sega, and the two video game manufacturers have inked a deal allowing Sega to have rights to use more than 70 Atari technology patents. Also, Sega has bought 4.7 million shares of Atari stock. Why the sudden shift? The reason that the Jaguar video game system has had the visibility of a stealth bomber stems from the fact that Atari had few funds to properly market the system. That makes sense. Now with $50 million licensing money and another $40 million from the stock sale, Atari is mounting a nationwide Jaguar attack. For Sega, the litigation was a drag, and Atari's technology gives Sega more opportunities and a strategic partner. So just reading things like that, it's not something that you would read in like an EGM or a GamePro. It comes off more professional, and that's why I love this magazine so much. 3DO faces mutiny by game developers. So after this really nice interview with Trip Hawkins, we have some bad news for 3DO in this particular issue of the magazine. At a recent meeting with 3DO developers, Trip Hawkins broke the news to Sanyo, Panasonic, Goldstar, and Creative Labs that combined they face losses of more than $200 million over the next 15 months if 3DO players remain at a competitive price point. Unsurprisingly, the news was spectacularly unwelcome, Without a revenue-generating plan to ease the manufacturer's burden, 3DO could have found itself in serious risk of 3DO factories around the world grinding to a halt. Unluckily for games developers, Trip Hawkins had a plan, however. 3DO games developers are to be taxed $3 per copy of every game they make. This is on top of an existing $3 royalty as part of the original 3DO deal. This new revenue will provide a market development fund, or MDF, half of which is believed to help manufacturers' profits, and the rest spent on marketing 3DO. And of course, if you're adding to the take that you are taking from the revenue for each game sold, that is not going to go over well with game publishers and game developers. So it's understandable why there was just a little bit of friction there between the 3DO executives and publishers. And of course, another reason why we started to see developers moving away from the 3DO and moving towards the newer consoles that were on the horizon in the Saturn and the PlayStation. An Arcadia section talking about Killer Instinct, talking about Data East Pinball and how Sega bought them. Data East Pinball, just really quickly, my favorite Data East machine is Lethal Weapon 3. It was at a bowling alley that I used to go to, and I absolutely loved it. Unfortunately, that game never got ported to Pinball Arcade, but I would have loved to have seen it. Coin-Op wrestles with ratings. Of course, we're still in the Mortal Kombat 2 violent video game era, so there's going to be some friction there with ratings, so that's unfortunately not a surprise. VR32, a clearer picture emerges. Nintendo's 32-bit Virtual Boy is scheduled for a worldwide ship-out next year. We have what we thought was going to be the Virtual Boy, or the VR32. There is the Imagining there at the bottom of the screen. Yet another platform that I have not owned. I really didn't have any interest in owning one, and if I'm honest, because I'm basically blind as a bat, I have no interest in owning one now. But it's still interesting to see the genesis of the system, if you'll pardon the pun, coming into fruition here. And I remember how it was titled the VR32, so seeing it still called that, much like seeing how the Nintendo 64 was called the Ultra 64, just brings back memories for me. Man, if Next Generation was still subscribing, I would still be sending this in. That's for darn sure. Another 3DO ad. Stop playing games, get real. I don't know how I feel about that, but again, 90s attitude, right? Talking about the CDI, Philips' accidental game machine could just possibly be the tortoise in a field of hares. Have some screenshots of the Seventh Guest, of Voyeur, and of Burn Cycle, as we talk about the CDI. Never owned a CDI. I remember seeing a CDI at either Sears or JCPenney. There was a golf game, I think with Palm Springs Golf, but I could be wrong. And I remember playing that a little bit, and that was as close to owning a CDI as I ever got. So I don't really have a lot to say on the CDI. Also talking about the 32X and the Jaguar. Kind of fitting how both of those are side by side, considering the eventual outcome for both. One, of course, being just the add-on, and the other being an actual console itself. I don't think either really had ever stood a chance, but I did buy a 32X. I did not buy a Jaguar. The NEC FX and the Neo Geo CD, again, two more platforms that I never owned. Neo Geo carts are spectacular because of their size. Yeah, those carts were pretty big. I remember that. They also have like the tech specs listed here for each of these. I haven't looked at them, but I do want to go back and kind of review those a little bit. Then we come to, we come to the PlayStation. Here it is. The original console controller's design with the D-pad. The controller feel, or the form factor, is not really changed, or at least hadn't changed for a while, but the layout obviously did with the addition of dual analog sticks. And there is the original PlayStation itself in all of its gray glory. I've talked about how much I love this console. I still love it. I'm a big fan today. It is a console that I continue to collect games for, and I just have a lot of fondness, a lot of love for the console, despite the fact that the games, at least visually, probably don't hold up today like they did back then. Looks like there's an image of Ridge Racer down there. What other games do we see there? We see Motor Toon Grand Prix, which was running at 60 frames per second in this particular issue. Toshinden and Cyber Sled are also listed. Of course, we remember that with the PlayStation, Namco was a big supporter. We had Ridge Racer, we had Air Combat, which is Ace Combat, we had Cyber Sled, we had Tekken. I mean, that's a great lineup just from one development team or one publisher. And of course, that number would grow as the months and the years would go on. Absolutely love the PlayStation. Then, of course, comes the Saturn. Here's the Saturn with some Virtua Fighter action for you. I owned a Saturn very briefly. It's an interesting story. It's a sad story in many ways, especially with how the launch was flubbed here in the U.S. and then just weird decisions were made between Sega of America and Sega Japan. It's an interesting story to be told by someone else who has a lot more knowledge than me. But from what I take away, it's just unfortunate how that all turned out, because the Saturn probably deserved a little bit better fate. But the PlayStation just ran it over, and then subsequently ran over the Nintendo 64 in years to come. And speaking of the Nintendo 64, we have Codename Ultra 64 right here with the logo. This was still about a year and a half away in the US when we saw these images, and we did have images for Killer Instinct here, as well as for Cruisin' USA. And Nintendo insiders have revealed that Mario's 64-bit debut is in production. Well, of course it is. That would be Super Mario 64, one of the biggest, or at least most successful games of all time. Just a note on Cruisin' USA, by the way, which gets a lot of hate from video game fans and collectors, just looking at it as being pretty much a worthless port of the arcade. I enjoy Cruisin' USA myself. I do think that Cruisin' World is a little bit better game, and I would play that over Cruisin' USA. But every so often, I just feel like popping Cruisin' USA in my Nintendo 64 and just running across the country in my car. Another great game from Eugene Jarvis and that team. And I really enjoy it. I enjoy the whole series, USA and World, and even Exotica I enjoy. So Ultra 64, it's really too soon to be talking about it in this issue, aside from the fact that it is a thing, but we would get more information on the Ultra 64 / Nintendo 64 in the months to come. Here's the 3DO. I've talked at length about the 3DO. I really don't need to continue to talk about it. You know where I stand on that particular system. Do like the fact that they're showing John Madden, FIFA, and Road Rash, which are 3 major games. Of course, with Trip Hawkins and his connection to EA, it was pretty easy to get EA on board, at least initially. It's an ad here from Digital Pictures, showing us Slam City and Corpse Killer and Supreme Warrior and Kids on Sight, which, by the way, is absolutely hilarious if you have not played or seen it. What's My Story and Night Trap. So there is the ad. Looks like God is holding a TV with Digital Pictures on it for reasons unknown. Can someone tell me, is that Tom Zito? No? The Violence Tapes. After the media's feeding frenzy of 1994, what is the future for violence and interactive entertainment? Forget the senators, forget the press releases. Let's cut to the chase. Here, in one virtual room, are 4 of the developers who will shape the future of this controversial genre. In this issue, we had Tom Zito from Digital Pictures, the aforementioned Tom Zito, Gilbert Austin from Maelstrom, Jay Wilbur from id Software, and Leif Marweed from Incredible Technologies. Incredible Technologies, oh, by the way, of Golden Tee fame. And that's where they have seen a lot of their success for many years now. It is a long article. We're not going to get into the violence aspect of it, but here is the article. It's really tough to read articles verbatim because these tend to be longer and in-depth, and I don't want to take away from the awesome writing that's here. There are scans of this magazine available, I believe, if you're interested, but it is definitely worth a read. All of these articles, honestly, are worth reads. So this is a pretty lengthy article here, there are different arguments. It defines the different rating systems. It's really an in-depth piece and is worth a read if you can find it. An ad here for The Legend of Korandia from Westwood Studios and distributed by Virgin. He who laughs lasts. It's a take or play on words. Baseball Tonight versus the competition. I'm a fan of sports video games, as many of you know. Baseball Tonight, maybe for the PC, was a little better. I haven't played the PC version, but I'll tell you, The 16-bit console versions of Baseball Tonight, not so much. I would rather play Hardball or World Series Baseball, and that's not a joke. World Series Baseball is fantastic. And Hardball actually is pretty good in its own way, too. But Baseball Tonight, despite the fact that it had ESPN branding, no, don't do it. In the alpha section, these are basically previews. So again, with alphas, we're using this terminology, making ourselves cutting edge. Another reason why I like this magazine. So for alphas, we're looking at Motor Tune GP, Virtua Fighter. Namco has a trio of games in Ridge Racer, Tekken, and Cyber Sled featured. Tama for the Saturn, Daytona for the Saturn, Clockwork Night for the Saturn, Toshinden for the PlayStation, Fight for Life for the Jaguar. Okay. Gex for the 3DO. Love Gex, and I talked about that in the last episode. And Virtua Fighter 2 in the arcade. So here's Motor Tune Grand Prix. The thing about Motor Tune Grand Prix that always sticks out to me is the fact that it's a game from Polyphony Digital. And for those who don't know, Polyphony Digital would go on to create Gran Turismo, which has been a tour de force in the racing genre for many years now. So it's kind of hard to believe that before Gran Turismo was a thing, this was where Polyphony Digital really got its big start. But yet, here we are, and it is very much a Mario Kart-ish kind of game. And if you have it for the PlayStation, you understand. It has a unique look to it. It's not my favorite kart racing game, but it still holds up. It's still very competent, and it's definitely colorful looking. And I don't think that these screenshots do it justice. I think if you play it on an original PlayStation, you understand that it's pretty colorful. The other game from Polyphony Digital, other than Gran Turismo, that I like to mention is Omega Boost, which I opened in an episode of Unsealed, and is a really cool mech-type shooter, and is worth looking into if you have a PlayStation console still. So here's Virtua Fighter for the Saturn. There are two kinds of people. There are people who like Virtua Fighter, and there are people who do not. I am in the latter. I appreciate what it is, and I will play Virtua Fighter every now and again, especially Virtua Fighter 4 Evolution, but I'm not really a fan of the game because it's a little too technical for me. And if I'm being completely honest, I have always been a Street Fighter 2 guy through and through since like 1992, and that is a long time. So while I appreciate what Virtua Fighter is, it's just not really my thing. But I will say that at least these screenshots that we're looking at from early 1995 looked impressive coming from the arcade to console. There's an ad here for Burn Cycle for the CDI. So yes, Philips did do advertising for CDI games. It just really didn't amount to much. And Namco. And we get a look here at Ridge Racer. And I'm not going to tell the story again. You've heard it. Ridge Racer, the first PlayStation game I ever played. The game that sold me on the $299 PlayStation. Got me to pre-order it. And I've been in love with the series ever since. Just a fantastic racing game. Arcade to a fault. It looks great on the PlayStation. And of course, the hidden option of being able to pop out the CD and pop in your own to race to your own music was far and away a cool feature. What else do we have here? We have an ad for Dark Forces for the CD-ROM for PC. It's over there on this side. I believe I heard someone say once that Dark Forces is basically a Star Wars take on Doom, and that's okay. I have Dark Forces for the PlayStation, which everyone pretty much admits is not a great version of the game, so I really don't have a lot of opinion on it. Rise of the Robots. Oh no. Oh no, Rise of the Robots. And also Daytona USA for the Saturn. Daytona is an arcade game that I didn't play much in arcades. And if I'm being honest, I didn't play on the Saturn either. My first Daytona experience was on the Dreamcast. And then I got to play Daytona USA 2 in an arcade called Kahunaville in Holyoke, Massachusetts, which I really liked. And the music to that game, just like the music in the original Daytona, really stuck with me. Clockwork Night is here for Saturn fans. Again, I have no experience with Clockwork Night, so it's really tough for me to make many comments or or relive any memories of Clockwork Night because I don't have a lot of experience with it. In fact, even when I worked for Funcoland, when we had a Saturn demo station, I didn't really use it all that much. I just never felt compelled. I didn't have the interest. I guess I was so wrapped up in the PlayStation and the N64 that I felt like I had enough games to play, and I didn't need another console in my life at that point in time. That's probably my loss, but it is what it is. Twinson's Relentless Adventure. For a real trip, check out the game demo on America Online by using keyword relentless. Oh, AOL. I'm going to be talking about AOL in the class that I teach, the middle school class that I teach pretty soon. So it's interesting to see an AOL keyword there. I have to remember that AOL is just getting started to get big in 1995. My experience with AOL really started in like 1996, 1997 especially. So I kind of forget sometimes that it had its start a bit earlier than I thought. Here's Toshinden, by the way, over here on this side. Not really the great flagship fighter that Sony wanted it to be. I think that really belonged to Tekken more than Toshinden, but it is what it is. An ad for Doom on the Jaguar, and speaking of the Jaguar, we have an alpha for the Fight for Life. Really, no comment on the Jaguar, except I knew it existed, and that's it. And Gex for the 32X. Sorry, not 32X. Oh boy, and I can't do another take on this. Gex for the 3DO, and eventually for the Saturn and the PlayStation. Of course, the voiceover for Gex, I believe that is it Robin Gould? I forget the name. I probably could look here. Dana Gould. That's it. Dana Gould, not Robert. And I was also thinking Elliot, but that's an actor for movies. But Gex was just awesome. The short voice clips and all of the TV and pop culture references really captured me in this game. Not to mention the way that it looked and the fact that it was a platformer. It was a pretty interesting platformer. If you ask me to pick either Bubsy or Gex, I'm going to pick Gex all day long. Although, as I said in the last episode, I think Bubsy gets a little too much in the way of criticism. And we have a look at Virtua Fighter 2 for arcades, as well as an ad for Aero the Acrobat 2 over on this side. So now we get to the review section, and the reviews here in this first issue are very capsulated. They're only one paragraph long, maybe two paragraphs long at times, but they do get to a lot of them. We have reviews of Alone in the Dark, Demolition Man, John Madden Football, Mega Race, Patank, Road Rash, Shockwave, Soccer Kids, Star Control 2, Super Wing Commander, and FIFA International Soccer, all for the 3DO. So if you have a 3DO, this is the issue to have, so you can take a look at some of the reviews for the games for the console, and some big reviews at that. John Madden got 4 stars, 4 out of 5. It's a 5-star rating system. For those players who haven't had a chance to see EA's John Madden Football in at least one of its many incarnations, this newest 3DO version is definitely worth taking a look. Every bit as exciting and easy to play as the original title, John Madden Football takes advantage of 3DO's custom animation hardware to create smoothly animated images that make it seem like you're watching a real game on TV. In addition to the normal NFL teams, the game also includes a score of classic teams from football's past. There's an all-Madden team consisting of today's greatest players, and best of all, there's an all-star team consisting of the best players in football's history. This is simply the best arcade-style football game currently available, 4 stars. And I completely agree with that review. John Madden Football on the 3DO is, I don't want to say a hidden gem, but it's a game that a lot of people kind of forgot about, and that's too bad. Road Rash also got 4 stars. One of the elements that made the cartridge version of EA's Violence Fest Road Rash so popular was its impressive ability to give players a truer feeling of speed than any game before it. Now armed with the processing power of the 3DO, crisper digitized images, and silky smooth animation, EA adds realism and depth to the power and velocity of its predecessor. Sticking with the rest of the game's in-your-face attitude, EA added a soundtrack including 2 songs from the grunge band Soundgarden. Although the game's long-term play value is damaged by repetitive levels, this is still a near-classic title that will make a worthy addition to any 3DO library. One thing that the review doesn't mention, and the thing about from Road Rash for the 3DO that always stands out to me, are the full motion video sequences, again talking about multimedia. I love the intro with Rusty Cage from Soundgarden. I love the full motion video that plays before and after each race, a lot of which is pretty funny. The full motion video that plays when your racer gets busted. It really showed off the power of multimedia at the time. And if we're being completely honest, the ports of Road Rash for the Saturn and the PlayStation, while good, aren't quite as good as the 3DO original. At least that is my opinion. Moving on to other reviews here. I want to make sure I'm not missing a page. We have some Jaguar reviews for Alien vs. Predator, which does get 4 stars here. Slayer, Way of the Warrior. Oof. Doom. Oh, Way of the Warrior and Slayer are 3DO titles, I'm sorry. Alien vs. Predator is for the 3DO, is Doom. Doom gets 3 stars. Tempest 2000 gets 4 stars. Tempest is always great. And Wolfenstein 3D gets 2 stars. Star Wars Arcade for the 32X gets 3 stars. Virtua Racing Deluxe also gets 3 stars. And Seventh Guest for the CDI gets 3 stars as well. Burn Cycle for the CDI gets 3 stars. Aero Fighters 2 for the Neo Geo gets 2 stars. And Doom 2 for the PC gets 3 stars. We also have an ad for Midnight Raiders and Fahrenheit for the Sega CD. And you can see what the reviews look like. Usually it's one screenshot kind of scattered, but very capsulated reviews. And it's not a bad approach. It gives you the skinny on each game. There's not a bunch of reading to be had. The reviews, as short as they are, justify the score, and you can just move on and make a buying decision from there. Other reviews for PC include The Fortress of Dr. Radiaki, Malcolm's Revenge, Master of Magic, and NHL Hockey 95, which got 4 stars. There's also an ad here for Wing Commander 3, The Heart of the Tiger, which is probably my favorite Wing Commander game of all. Seeing Mark Hamill on the screen in full motion video, glorious full motion video, along with Malcolm McDowell, was just mind-blowing. And even on the PlayStation, which is the version that I have now, I can't get enough of watching those full motion video sequences. They're legit. Even if Chris Roberts may be Star Citizen it up now, Wing Commander 3 and Wing Commander 4 were very legitimate and enjoyable games. We also have some Sega CD reviews here for Battle Core, getting 3 stars, Lethal Enforcers 2 getting 3 stars, Mickey Mania, which I believe is a David Jaffe game if I'm not mistaken, that gets 4 stars, The Masked Rider gets 2 stars, Snatcher gets 3 stars. We have a Snatcher review here, and I'll read that one for you. For Sega CD, this is mildly groundbreaking. The approach to this the approach is very Japanese. I'm sorry, mixing mature character relationships and what other game do you have to worry about if your wife wants a divorce? With severed heads, talk of STDs, and then throwing in a cute robot sidekick and other strained comic relief. The CD-based dialogue could have been supplied by better actors, and there's no consistent way your character can pick up or handle objects, but as long as you don't mind the schizo handling of the material, it isn't all bad. 3 stars. There are also reviews for Contra Hardcore and Dynamite Heady for the Genesis, and Earthworm Jim. Earthworm Jim getting 4 stars here. Sonic and Knuckles getting 4 stars as well, calling it evolutionary. Mickey Mania for the Genesis getting 4 stars, NHL 95 getting 4 stars, and the lovable Shaq Fu getting some run in this issue, getting 2 stars. We also have an ad for Eternal Champions for the Sega CD, and I did mention in the last episode that Eternal Champions on the Sega CD was pretty impressive, and here's the ad for it with the M rating down at the bottom of the page. For the Super Nintendo, we have a review of Donkey Kong Country. Again, this is the first issue of Next Generation, so they're going to be catching up on some big games. They gave Donkey Kong Country 4 stars. Samurai Showdown gets 3 stars. Urban Strike getting 3 stars. The Adventures of Batman and Robin getting 3 stars. And The Lion King, wow, there are a lot of reviews here, getting 4 stars. Mortal Kombat 2 gets 5 stars from Next Generation. NBA Live 95 also getting 5 stars, and that is well deserved. NBA Live 95 was just the change that the NBA games needed from EA to really take off. And of course, the NBA Live series went on to be quite successful. Pitfall: The Mayan Adventures gets 2 stars. X-Men Mutant Apocalypse gets 3 stars. We also have arcade reviews, which is appreciated. Ace Driver getting 4 stars. Cruisin' USA getting 5 stars. I approve. Primal Rage getting 3 stars. I also approve of that one. Sorry, the idea of dinosaurs in a fighting game works for me, but the play controls do not, and the fatalities or special moves are just really annoying to pull off. Ridge Racer 2 gets 4 stars, and Virtua Cop gets 3 stars. Finally, Killer Instinct getting 4 stars. Another ad for an ESPN sports game from Sony ImageSoft. This is for ESPN Sunday Night NFL. While it fares a little bit better than Baseball Tonight, it's not by much. Madden was still on top at this juncture in time. We have some letters to the editor here. Great news. I love reading Edge, and I'm sure that Next Generation will be even more interesting. We've been saying welcome to the next level for a while now, and I hope that Next Generation will be just that. And that is from Tom Kalinske, Sega of America CEO. Oh, this is from all the CEOs of the companies. Check these out. The launch of Next Generation is great news. Everyone here at Capcom fights over the few copies of Edge that we get. Next Generation is sure to be a winner. That is from Joe Marici from Capcom, Vice President of Marketing. We have Promotions Manager from Philips Media Gaming. Tim Dunley from Sega of America is here. Janet Strauss from 3DO. George Harrison from Nintendo of America writes, "Welcome to the jungle. Congratulations on your debut into the video game industry. This is an exhilarating time for all of us as we enter into the true high-tech nature of video gameplay. Best regards, George Harrison." Brian Fargo from Interplay also writes really quickly, "Congratulations, the launch of Next Generation will be good for the gaming industry in America." Yeah, you really can't get any better than that. "Good luck on your edgy new mag," writes Dave Perry and the Earthworm Jim team. "Will Next Generation print game strategy guides?" from John Summers in San Jose. And Next Generation says, "No, it is all about news. News of new games, new systems, new debates raging in the game development community, and new stories. We don't do tips." And I think that really sums it up as I get ready to wrap up this episode of Print from the Past. Next Generation knew exactly what it wanted to be. What it wanted to be was a magazine that was straight to the point, that had cutting-edge pieces about technology, about companies in the business, about the business side of things, and to-the-point reviews and previews so that people could just get the information they wanted without much fluff. I appreciated this magazine. I still appreciate it today. It is a fantastic issue up and down. I am looking forward to reading this from page to page to page to page after I get off camera. I am incredibly excited to actually have this to myself. I have not read this magazine now in 25 years, so it is going to be a lot of fun for me to catch up. And before I go, I want to show off the 2 other things that Benny sent to me that I'll be covering. One of these I'll be covering in a future episode of Print from the Past. This here is a Game Informer issue from, it looks like, January, February of 1992. So I may do that next month as we take a look. It looks like Faceball 2000. We have some Lemmings action going on as well. So we'll take a look at this, including what is a really cool picture of Andy McNamara as a very young lad. We will take a look at that in a future episode. And he also sent me, because he knows I'm a sports video game fan, this Competitor's Guide to Sports Video Gaming, which was an EA Sports add-on for Electronic Gaming Monthly. And it has some bits and blurbs about the sports games for the 1999 sports year, it looks like. Knockout Kings, Tiger Woods 99, FIFA 99, and Madden 99, and more. So I'm looking forward to digging into those. So thanks again to Benny. Thanks to all of you for watching, especially this episode as a dream of mine has come true. I cannot tell you how exciting it is to have this magazine in my possession and to be able to open it brand new and read it for the first time. That particular issue that was printed that no one else got a chance to read before I did. So that is certainly as exciting as it possibly can get. We'll be doing many more episodes of Print from the Past. I still have some more magazines down below. An EGM2, I have some more Game Players, some Game Pro that I've gotten to, and more. So I hope that you'll stick with me as we go through this series. Thanks as always for watching. I really appreciate it. To each and every one of you, please take care of yourselves and each other. And again, we'll do this soon. Take care.